This is the second bonus section of this course. I've been receiving a few questions about how to upload files and images to a task using a REST API. So I've put together this section on how we can achieve this. There will be a little bit of theory first, but only a small amount, as this is a little different to what we have previously been dealing with in this course. We'll be sending a binary file rather than sending a JSON request, obviously for the file upload. So let's get started. So you're probably asking what's different and how we're going to do it. Well, we'll still be using get, post, patch and delete HTTP methods to follow obviously the RESTful principle. We'll create new routes to handle images against a task and amend our current task API to take into account the images against the task. The new routes will be added as follows. So we've got the get, and what this does, this gets a particular image. Obviously you'll see /tasks/task ID, but obviously we now create a new route for /images/image ID. So this actually gets the image itself. So you're probably thinking, what does that mean? There'll be two sections of an image. One will be attributes, so things like metadata such as a description or a title of an image. And the other thing's actually the image itself, the image file. So that leads us nicely on to the next part, so we can get the particular image attributes. So it's /images/image ID/attributes. And this will actually return a JSON response, just kind of what we've been used to in this course. The next method is patch, and obviously as you know, patch is now to update something. So what we'll be doing here, we'll actually be updating the particular attributes. So for example, we may want to update the title or the file name. We send this as a JSON request and we get a JSON response back with the new attributes. So nothing really that much different in there compared to updating a task. Then we'll be looking at post, and obviously as you know, post is to create the image itself. This has an endpoint of /images. So you can see here that we're associated with the task, particular task ID, we're associating or creating an image against that task ID. What this does, this uploads the file itself and then returns a JSON response for obviously the attributes that we've provided. And then we've got delete. So now you delete a particular image and actually it returns a JSON response to say whether that was successful or not. And then we'll actually also go on to edit the current functionality of the task API to allow it to incorporate the image. So this is not just standalone, we'll actually be merging the two together. So you're probably thinking, what does that mean? That means that when we get a task, the JSON response that we'll get will actually include a JSON collection of images. So you don't actually return the image with the task API. You actually just return a list of images. Because if we actually returned all of the images associated with a task, that'll actually slow down everything. So if you just wanted to get some task details, you wouldn't want to download every image just to get them task details. You know, some images, and you know, we're talking general images that's taken on an iPhone or some sort of mobile device. They're usually about 3 or 4 megabytes in size, and obviously if you've got 10 of them, you don't want to be downloading 40 megabytes just to get the task details. Now what you normally do on the client side to handle these task details and obviously the images themselves, you do a first call to get the task details. You would then populate your client application or website with the task details, and then actually you fire off separate requests, separate get requests to get the particular images and image attributes. So they could be actually downloading in the background, and obviously once they've downloaded, your client application could actually just pop them images in to say, well, I've downloaded that image and now it's associated with the task and now you can see it. So that's the reason for doing that. You don't actually return the image file itself with the task itself. So you just return sort of a link or some attributes regarding that image. So how is this different? The main differences are the content type that is used and the request body that is sent on the post, which is the create/upload image. Previous in this course, we have used a JSON content type for the request and the response body. But this time we'll be dealing with binary files, such as images or documents, so we must use a different content type. Binary files don't contain ASCII characters, such as alphabetical characters and certain symbols. It's actually binary data. So we can't send the image as part of the JSON request. Well, actually that's not particularly true. We can send a binary file, but we'll have to encode it using the base64 algorithm. What that does, that takes a binary file and creates a textual representation of that file itself. But it does come with its cons. Basically, it adds an overhead, so a larger file size of around about 33% larger. You can do it, there's nothing stopping you do it, but it's generally not best practice to do that, because it would mean all of your file sizes would be 33% larger. Now, the way the world is at the moment, a lot of people use mobile devices, their data connections, so really the downloads should be as small as possible without obviously compromising the quality. So we will ignore this method and just use the best practice instead. The content type that we'll be using this time instead of application/JSON is multipart/form data. And it looks a bit like this. It's probably familiar if you've done any web development in the past and you've used an image upload from a web form. Basically, when you submit that form generally, it would structure the request like this, and you can see that it looks completely different to a JSON request. Basically, we've got the content type at the top. Now you're probably thinking, what's this boundary? So what the boundary does, because you can actually send multi-parts in the same request, hence multi-part. So the boundary actually is a random character string that's used to separate each individual part of the request. So we can actually send different types of data with this content type. So the first thing that you'll notice is we've got some form data here and the name as attributes. So these are our image attributes. Now this name can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be attributes. This is the part that you would change if you're developing a system that's not related to tasks or images. This is where we get a little bit clever with this, because we're actually going to send a JSON request or a JSON body within this attribute. Now this attribute is just a text attribute. You could just type in a title of my selfie and you could use that as your request. But we're going to use JSON because it allows us to put multiple different types of attributes in a structured way that we can send along with the file itself. So as you can see, we've got the boundary at the top here. So that's the boundary that we set. Whatever's set in this part must equal the same throughout the request body. You put the boundary where you start and the boundary on the next part. So it's kind of where it ends in a way. So start, obviously separation, and then the end of the request itself. And you can see here that this looks slightly different. We've got two dashes at the end. So dash dash, one part of the request, dash dash, second part of the request, dash dash, end part of the request, but it's got two dashes at the end to tell the system that it is actually the end of the request body itself. So the next bit from the attributes, we've now got the file itself. This has a few different types of things that we send along with it. Now you're probably thinking this is a little bit tricky and what does all this mean? A lot of client systems or client frameworks have this sort of structure built into it. So, you know, there may be a method in your client framework that has upload file. That would actually set this format for you. But if not, and you're actually creating the request itself, this is how you do it. Content disposition, all this means is what actually is it? What is it form data such as fields, or is it a file with a file name? So obviously you can have multiple form data. Actually, you could have multiple files to be fair, but it just has to obviously separate out using this type of structure here. So there we're saying it's form data, and now down here we're saying this is the actual file itself, and the file has a file name. So obviously we can use this file name on the back end or whatever like that, so we can name the document the same as what we're uploading it as. So the next thing is content type. We're going to upload an image here. It's actually a JPEG, but obviously there's different content types for different types of images, or even files actually. We have this one as an image JPEG, but it could be image/PNG. There's a massive list of content types out there. The next thing is the content transfer encoding. Now, because we're actually sending a binary file, it is a physical file, it's not just text, it is a physical file. We have to set that as binary. Now here is where once you've uploaded, the client or the browser or whatever device you're using will automatically convert the file itself to data, binary data, and all that, you know, it could end up massive in there, but it's kind of non-readable, non-textual contents, so that's why I've just put a placeholder in here. But technically that's where the contents of the file will end up, all in this request. And then obviously we've got the end boundary here. I know this looks, you know, a little bit difficult to understand, but actually it'll totally make sense once we show you a demo. So from here, that's the theory basically finished. It's just a little bit of background because I don't want to go over what patch and delete and, you know, all that stuff is, because we've already covered it in this course. So what I'm going to do now is actually demo using the upload system, and just to show you how it works, just so you can get appreciation of what we're actually doing in the course and how we're actually building it.